All I want is for the type to get bigger when the browser width gets bigger and then gets smaller when the browser gets smaller. It just breaks at specific screen sizes. So I'm honestly a little bit at a loss as to how to get this done. My name is Ben Burns. I'm a designer, creative director, and father of the year, 5 years running. I'm on a journey to rethink, revamp, and redesign my personal website. It's the only project that I've never finished. It's time to get this built. Welcome to Built by Hand. Last episode, I designed the desktop and mobile versions of my website. With the design in place, it's now time to start development. It's time to actually build this thing. Hold on real quick.
Hold on to your butt.
I know you're not going to leave this video unliked, right?
I actually pressed it already.
Go ahead, down below. Click the button.
Which button is the button you're supposed to push? Point to it. No!
Now, typically in the past, I would hire a team of developers to build the websites that we designed for clients. Whether that's a custom theme or a completely custom site, I've been able to hand off the designs to experts who make it happen. And that works great. I recommend that. There's a beautiful collaboration that happens because developers and engineers are incredibly creative. I believe that we're two sides to the same coin, but the name of the game here is Built by Hand, and that means I want to do everything myself. So, how do I develop a custom website, a quality custom website from scratch without knowing how to code? I can remember when I was just starting out how overwhelming the world of web development felt, especially for someone who spent a lot of time in identity and print and packaging design. It felt like a different language, which I guess it was, but I was really interested in it, so I started just hacking things together, and eventually my interest bled over into client work, and that was stressful. There were so many frustrating moments, things I just didn't understand. Every time I ran into a problem, I tried to find a quick answer in some forum, but I felt like I was flying by the seat of my pants, and that I couldn't make what I wanted to make. I had no idea what I was doing, but I guess I wanted to. I wanted to learn. I just felt like it was too much to absorb to learn HTML and CSS and JavaScript. I settled for picking up bits and pieces. Now, I kind of figured I was alone in this, but it turns out it's a pretty common story. I actually had a chat with Ran Segall, a designer, educator, YouTuber, and oddly enough, his story is really similar. A little bit of learning that you had to do in the beginning. Can you talk a little bit about some of those challenges that you faced? Because I'll tell you mine, man. I didn't understand the box model whatsoever. I didn't understand why I couldn't grab an image and then put it on a screen exactly where I wanted to. And so it took a long time for me to understand the difference between margin and padding and how to position things the right way. So what were some of those things that you had to overcome coming from a design background, moving into this visual development world?
So I've been doing design for like 20 years. So I kind of feel old school in a sense where back in my day, when we were chatting with people, it wasn't Slack. It was just like forums. And in the forums, there was a way to embed HTML. So if you wanted your post or comment to look really cool, you would put a border on it or make the font bigger or make it click or enter. So we would have to learn a little bit of, HTML and inline CSS to kind of customize how our chatting would look like. So I think, I grasped the box model and all of these basic properties. I've had this for a long time just because, again, for 20 years, initially I had to code things myself. So I understood the basics, but then actually creating cool modern stuff for, the web today, whether it is interactions or even things like position. Like, what's the difference between position absolute and position relative? And all of these kind of things are really hard to explain people just by talking. And so these are the actual things that for me make the difference between, you can you can do the layout and then you can do whatever you want.
Ran is now on a mission to help designers learn how to create great websites using no-code tools. And that's exactly what I need to use in order to build my site. If you're going to go no code or light code, the success and failure of your site really relies on the platform that you pick to build with. It's a big decision that can cause you major pain if you don't pick the right one.
You have chosen wisely.
I have been through the ringer when it comes to all the platforms that promise an easy to build website like stock themes and page builders and WYSIWYG editors, Flash, Dreamweaver. I have seen and done it all. Now, I thought about making this section dramatic. I thought about pretending to sort through and find the right platform to build with, and I guess that could have been educational, but honestly right now, there's only one no-code platform that I build with, and that's Webflow. For those of you who don't know, Webflow is a visual development tool. From their website, Webflow empowers web designers to build professional, responsive, and custom websites in a completely visual canvas with no code. As you probably guessed, this episode is sponsored by Webflow. But here's the deal. I would have built this site in Webflow even if they weren't a sponsor. And don't tell them, I would have done this for free. By the way, the Webflow account that you're about to see, that's mine. I've been paying for it for years, and it's not free. It's not a free account, and I will continue paying for it after this series. Listen, by the end of the video, you're going to want to try Webflow. It's the truth. And when you do, please click the link in the description or go to thefutur.com/Webflow. That's going to help us track how much of an impact that we've had for them from this series. Here's why I'm such a Webflow fanboy. First, I have complete control over everything you see on the page. And then on the front end, it puts out really clean code, which I have confirmed with some engineer friends of mine. And in the development process, there's nothing weird that happens in the designer. There's nothing that I have to hide or navigate or work around that's built into the tool. And then the process of development is awesome because it's visual, and it's also very similar to the way a developer would develop the site. And then finally, the basic animation controls are very intuitive, and After Effects should take some cues from Webflow. Working with Webflow and clients honestly has been just awesome. You can set up maintenance engagements and bill everything through Webflow. You can host clients' websites on your own account. You can kind of lock areas and aspects of the site that the clients won't be able to edit or destroy. Webflow plus clients equals just awesome. I have done quite a bit of work on Webflow in the past few years. First, we built the Hamilton's website as part of the Building a Brand series. Then we built the Futur's website in Webflow, and that has been amazing. And I've also done 3 or 4 other websites for my friends and my personal stuff in Webflow. And it's a tool that I'm familiar with. You know, I speak the language. Just to give you guys some context on what I'm going to be doing today, I will pull up our XD document and show you give you a quick walkthrough on the design for anybody that's kind of tuning in for the first time. So we're doing 2 versions. Update, there we go. We're doing a light mode and a dark mode. And over the weekend I made a simple change to the nav bar. But you can see it's a pretty radical change from the current site, which we'll take a look at in a minute. So we're going to be recreating this in Webflow today. For those of you who aren't familiar with the Webflow interface, this is how it looks when you start a fresh page. So on the left, you can control your site and e-commerce settings and see all of your collections and all of the pages that you've built. You can view your page structure, and then you can actually add elements to the page. And on the right-hand side, you can change the way that these elements look and behave. It feels very much like all the other design programs that we use, But all these visual tools here on the right use the same naming and principles and fundamentals from HTML and CSS. And what's nice is as you use Webflow, you'll start to learn more about this stuff, which is one of the reasons why I love this platform. It actually teaches you the web fundamentals as you build your site. Super cool. Trigger warning. We're going to roll up our sleeves and get nerdy in this episode in the best of ways. While this isn't going to be a full-on tutorial, we're going to cover some principles and fundamentals of web development that you need to know as you embark on your own website. Speaking of fundamentals, there's one core web development principle that seems to stump a lot of designers: the box model. We're so used to being able to throw something like an image onto an artboard and pretty much move it wherever we want. Well, in web development, things don't really work out that way. You see, on the web, everything you put on screen is considered a box. You know, we're talking about images, blocks of text, a video. They're all interpreted as rectangular shapes. And so these elements all live inside other containers, which are also boxes. The biggest container that you'll run into is really the page body, and that's the box that contains the entire web page. So then you have smaller containers inside the page containers that are usually called divs. Now, divs are simply invisible boxes that can contain things and be styled to look and perform however you want them to. Think of divs like building blocks or Legos of a web page. They can sit next to each other or stack on top of each other or be inside each other. Anyway, the reason why you can't just drop an image right in the center of a web page is because our browser uses all these boxes to figure out where everything needs to be positioned on the page. Where something lives is really determined by its relationship to everything else on the page. Let's take a look at a really simple example. So here we have two boxes on a page.
Ha ha ha, classic comedy.
By default, they would look like this. If we wanted to add some space in between them, we would need to add margin. Margin is the clear space around an element. But let's say you have one div inside of another div. You can also move that child div, one inside, by changing the padding of the parent box. That's the clear space. Padding is the clear space on the inside of the parent box. Now, there are other ways that you can position things.
Well, duh.
But I think that the big takeaway here is that web development is not as simple as plopping an element on an artboard and being able to drag it wherever you want it to go. Understanding the box model is crucial. That's why before you sit down to develop your site, it really helps to have a plan for development in place. So let's take a look at how I plan to structure my pages. And the way we'll go about this is first I'll sketch out how this system works, and then I'll show you how this would apply to one of the pages that I designed. Inside the page body, I'm going to need to have special containers, divs, called sections. And the name kind of says it all. These signify the major sections of the page, like the header or the content section or the footer. Now inside each of the page sections, we'll have several divs that I call containers. Now think of these containers like rows in a table. And then inside each container, the rows, we're gonna have columns. And for my design, I can have up to 5 columns inside of each row. Now, this whole system is really flexible because you can have an element inside of a row that spans all 5 columns, or you can split it up between a 3-column and a 2-column item. I mean, you can really create some interesting layouts here. Okay, so let's take the collab page, for example. It's a good page to start with. If I were to chop this up, right? We'd have maybe a section here. Make this transparent. This is going to be our heading section, and then this is going to be our content section, and then we may want to do a separate section for the contact form, and then finally we've got our footer section. So you remember inside of our section, we've got rows. So if these are rows in a table, smaller to fit the grid, this is probably going to be a row. So here's a row, here's another row, Here's another row. Here's another row. And these are what we call containers. Now remember, inside containers, we've got our columns. So here's a column. There's another column there, another column there. And finally, one more column here. Now, obviously the spacing is gonna fit the grid, right? We've got our page section, which is this giant box here. And then we've got our containers, which I'm considering the rows. And then we've got all of our individual columns inside the rows. So you can have up to 5 columns in my grid situation. You can have as many as you want. But what's really cool about this page structure is what happens when the browser width changes. When the browser gets smaller, like when someone is viewing the site from their phone, the columns inside of all the container rows stack on top of each other. And then when the browser gets larger, like when somebody views it on a desktop screen, the columns inside of our containers simply expand to fill the space within reason. Now, I've always run into a problem with this approach: typography. If the container is allowed to get wider or narrower depending on the browser width, but the size of the type doesn't change, weird stuff can happen. And likewise, if the type size scales up and down with the browser, but the container doesn't budge, well, really weird things can happen. So this is my old site, and I tried making things very responsive. But if you notice this heading right here, when the site width gets pretty wide, it starts looking terrible. Like it's way too large. And then as we decrease it, you know, it starts looking very, like almost way too small in comparison to the rest of the text. It just looks bad. What I really wanted to be able to do is to scale the size of everything in relationship to the browser window. So no matter what size screen the viewer has, things look the same. I don't want to have any weird text wrapping or any orphans or widows, and I definitely didn't want to have anything look sorely out of place. I gotta admit, I'm a little frustrated right now. I'm trying to figure out this whole responsive type thing before I really officially move into development. And all I want is for the type to get bigger when the browser width gets bigger and then gets smaller when the browser gets smaller. But the thing is that every time I set it to viewport units, it just breaks at specific screen sizes. So I'm honestly a little bit at a loss as to how to get this done, and I don't know. And the frustrating thing is that I know exactly how to do this in CSS. I can set a calc function, it'll be fine, and but then I would be coding the entire site. You know, I'd be coding all of the typography styling in custom code, and I don't want to do that. I want to use the Webflow thing. It's frustrating. The YouTube gods smiled upon me and delivered an incredible tutorial by a Webflow expert named Timothy Ricks. His method for responsive website styling, what he calls Wizardry, was exactly what I was looking for. All right, so today we're gonna get all of our typography styled so that it's super responsive on desktop and mobile. And to start, I'm gonna build a style guide. And this is basically a big list of all of the elements, type included, that we use on the site. And I'm gonna put it all on one page and get everything designed and styled all at once. So the Wizardry style guide actually turned out really nicely. All of the type is responsive to the browser, but it also locks at a certain point. So you can see it's changing in size until a certain point, and boom, locks it in place. So no more weirdness, no more odd text wrapping, and it's super responsive. I'm happy with this. Wizardry worked like a dream. I couldn't have asked for more. And yes, we will link the tutorial in the description below, and I would love for you guys to go show Tim some love. Once the style guide page was all done and in place, all I needed to do was to use my framework to build out the rest of the static pages on the site. Remember how I planned to structure my pages, like the sections and containers and columns, that whole framework? Well, it turns out this pairs beautifully with the Wizardry system, and putting together the pages, I mean, it was a breeze. So far, we cloned the existing site and then kind of scrubbed it clean last time. And we've got a ton of typography settings all set. We've got our Wizardry stuff set up. So we are moving along to the Now page. So now we've got some cool stuff here. We've got a line, so we'll figure out how we want to do that. And then we've got another 2-column layout where we've got our meta text over here, then we've got a heading, and then we've got this hoverable system here. And I think we're actually going to use a collection for these, which will make it really easy for me to update. Okay, content. All right, so let's take a look at this page in XD. All right, so we've got our featured post here, which is the most recent. So that needs to be a collection list. And then we've got this collection list down here. So we need 2 collection lists on the page. One that just pulls one item from the content collection, and then the rest is all everything else. And we go to projects. Instead of just deleting everything, because we pasted the Now page into this content page. So instead of going through and just deleting all the sections, I'm actually going to use some of the styling. So we've got a really, really basic div block and an image inside this 5-column column, I guess, five column span, something. So I'm just gonna add our collection list inside that 5-column span. As I went through and developed all the static pages, I noticed that I started to pick up speed the deeper I went. The first page took, 3 or 4 hours to develop, and then the second only took about 2 hours, and then eventually I got to where I could knock out a page in about 15 minutes. That's the class effect. So once you've styled a piece of text, you never need to do that again. Reusing symbols and components also helped a lot throughout the process. I have a little pro tip for you. Pro tip! Now, you might have noticed that I've been typing names in the upper right-hand corner of the Webflow editor. And that's for a good reason. So as you make things on your website look the way that you want them to look, Webflow remembers these changes by saving the settings in groups called classes. Now, classes are great because you can reuse them. Here's a key separation between a beginner and a pro. Don't use the names that Webflow comes up with. Having a class named header 712, it doesn't tell you anything. And it's gonna be super hard to reuse those classes in the future if you can't remember what that thing was. Having some kind of a system is absolutely essential to staying organized. But one thing to make sure of, whenever you're naming classes, don't use capital letters and don't use spaces. If you ever get into the custom code side of things, it's really hard to reference classes that have odd spaces or capital letters in them. Some new classes today. All right, so we're done with the static pages, basically, right? And I need to build out the dynamic pages, and this is really all about content. So I have a pretty interesting plan here. I'm gonna make one collection, a single database that holds all of my content, and then I'll make a single template that will show each type of content in a header. So for example, if it's a blog post, I'll have a header image, but if it's a video, I'll put that video in the header instead. And then if it's a podcast, I won't have an image or a video up there. I'll put the podcast player in its place, and we can hide and show these blocks depending on what kind of content it is. So I'm really excited to get into this. Now we've got to figure out the video embed. So that's the problem that I'm going to solve next. So let's say we had, let's go to the future.com. Let's see. Go to videos and we'll sort by most popular and see how many feature ya boy. All right, so the top 5 are all Chris. Totally get that. But then look at this. Bam! Building a brand. Who's that dude? So how to present designs to clients. All right, so then we have our video embed. There's the URL. So the video shows up here. Content type is going to be a video. Content category. We don't have one of those yet, so we'll just leave that. And let's do this here. Pull this copy from there. Paste it on our leading heading. All right, so what we just did was we fleshed out the content collection. We added some fields here, including a category, content list or collection, and then a content types. And then we made the featured image / video block conditionally visible depending on the content type. So now we get into podcasting. And ideally, we would have a player that looks the same across the entire site. But the thing is that I show up on, many different people's podcasts, and they're all going to have different embed codes. So what I want to do is add a HTML embed. We'll make this under its own div real quick. So we'll add a div here. And this HTML embed is going to contain the podcast code. Let's see if this works. Yeah, that works nicely. So let's see. I can change the code here to, width 100%, max width 660 pixels. Well, we just don't put a max width there, right? It's not the greatest, but it works. There we go. That looks good. Okay, so let's recap what we did today. Today was pretty intense. We did the resources page, so we've got 2 collection lists on this page, a featured content area, and then we've got our grid collection here, which we're gonna be filtering pretty soon. I'm gonna change this just a little bit. Make this bottom padding just a little bit smaller. There we go. And then we got our content system, taken care of. We've fixed all of our collection items in the back end, and we added basically a multi-content type functionality to our content template page. So if we have a podcast, it pulls in the podcast embed, and if we have a video, it pulls in the video. Pretty productive day. At this point, we had all of the static pages done. The content management system was up and running and looking good, and the desktop site was looking pretty close to being done. Now, because of my framework, all I needed to do to make the site responsive, like to make it friendly for mobile, was just to make sure that the columns were stacking the right way and that all the text was legible on all of the devices. To be honest, the entire development process to this point was pretty painless, which actually may not have made for a thrilling episode. There wasn't a huge challenge or emotional arc for me to go through and overcome. But the thing is that all the things that I've learned over the years, I've picked up by trial and error. It's just doing stuff and seeing what happens. And I guess that leads me to a good takeaway here. In the tech world, I'm an old dog. And if I can learn new tricks, trying new things, so can you. I see so many of you guys standing on the precipice, looking over the edge, wondering if you should start something or try something, and something is holding you back. Like you can't try putting together a website without knowing how to code, or you can't apply for that job because it says you don't have enough experience, or you can't start a business without a degree. If you're waiting for permission or a sign, well, here it is. You got this. Go try something. Go do something new. And if you want a great place to start, well, that'd be by giving Webflow a try. You see? Full circle there. Yep. No, head to thefutur.com/Webflow or click at the link in the description to sign up for free. The really cool thing is that you can build out your entire website, collections and all, absolutely free until you're ready to publish it on your own domain. So there's literally no reason not to start. Like now. Go do it now. Go! Get out of here. Next episode is going to be a doozy. We're going to talk about taking the website to a whole other level by working with animations and interactions. I have sliders that need to slide, page transitions that need to transition, and scroll effects that need to scroll? Animate? Anyway, I'm trying things that I've never tried before, like making an animated dark mode switch and learning jQuery. And I'm going to be honest, not everything works out. It was tough. I will see you then. But for now, remember, I'm not here to tell you how to do things. I'm simply sharing my journey. So pick up what you need, leave what you don't, find the process that works for you. Oh, and by the way, we crammed about 20 hours of development work into this little episode. So obviously there's just so much that we couldn't cover. So if you want to watch everything unfold live, you can head over to thefutur.com/built-by-hand or see the playlist on my personal YouTube channel. All of the full-length stream recordings are there for you. As always, I'm going to be stalking the comments, so be sure to chat with me below. It's time for you guys to get back to work. You got this. Remember, we love you, and we'll see you next time.